and welcome back. Welcome to video number 2 of my 3-part video series. As I mentioned before, I'm Dennis Hodges and I'm a fine art photographer. I also happen to be self-taught, which has not prevented me from having my work featured in these publications and others, as well as having my work shown around the world in museums, galleries, and festivals. But let's talk about you and your work. If you watched the first video, and if you haven't, please take a look at it. But at the beginning of the first video, I show one of my photographs that's blurred. I made a mistake. Look, mistakes are part of life. Mistakes are part of learning, part of growing, and part of photography. In this video, I want to share 3 mistakes you could easily avoid that will help improve your photography dramatically. So, what do you say? Should we jump into the video? Let me hop on the computer and let's get going. Okay, here we are in video number 2. Today we're going to talk about 3 mistakes that you can avoid when you're taking your pictures. It's that simple. We're kind of beginning to talk about transformation of your work. You saw in video number 1 how artificial or perceived obstacles, really, we can't let those hold you back in your work. You need to set those aside so you can create some of your most amazing work ever. And in this video, I'm going to share just some practical ideas to help you see some immediate improvement in your work. Basically, they're quick wins, if you will. I like the idea of quick wins, something you can grab a hold of, use immediately, and maybe you'll see your world just a little bit differently as a result as you grow as a photographer. Sure, a little bit more about me, if I may. To be honest with you, I really don't remember my childhood before I had a camera. I've had a camera in my hand since I was a young child. And as I think I mentioned before, I didn't study photography formally, but I'm always learning and growing as an artist. I learn from other artists, other photographers. I study, I learn, I look at pictures, practice my art to grow appropriately. And honestly, about 10 years ago, after this has been a passion of mine throughout my life, but I never took it that seriously. And about 10 years ago, I asked myself, what are you waiting for? What am I holding out for? And today I do workshops, I do talks, I do exhibits. In fact, here's a couple of examples of some of my exhibits. This is one from an exhibit in Pereira, Colombia, and this is one from Krasnodar, Russia. So I show my work regularly around the world. And honestly, the reason I'm doing this whole series is that I believe that we are all creative. Everyone is creative. You're creative. And we just need to believe in ourselves and tap into our creativity, embrace our creativity so we can realize who we are as photographers and as artists. Our quote to start us off this time is from the photographer Andreas Feininger, who said, "No one can do inspired work without genuine interest in his subject and understanding of its characteristics." So the objectives of this session are pretty straightforward, actually. You heard the name. We're going to learn 3 mistakes to avoid in photography and learn, hopefully, how to avoid them. That's the goal. Let's see how we can get on here. So the first mistake we want to avoid is not paying attention to the light. Look, it's pretty simple stuff. If there's no light, there's no photograph. Photography, actually, the word photography is a Greek word. Photo meaning light, and graphy meaning writing. So photography is literally writing with light. If you don't have light, you cannot write with photography. You cannot make a photograph. So being conscious of light is really essential. And we need to feel where the light is coming from at all times. In fact, try this right now. Wherever you are listening to this video, watching this video, take a look at the light around you, whether it's artificial or natural light, doesn't matter. But look at the light, where it's coming from and how it interacts with various objects and subjects near you or even you yourself. Look at your hands. Take a look at how light is coming in and how does it interact? What kind of patterns does it create? What kind of shadows? What kind of textures does it reveal? And this is part of learning how to feel the light is wherever you are at all times, to be thinking about the light, whether you have a camera in hand or not. But just look at the world around you and absorb the light, think about the light, and just be conscious of how it works. Now, this is true for natural light as well as artificial light, but especially with natural light, because natural light, look, we have 24 hours in the day, we have X hours of daylight and X hours of nighttime at all times, and that varies with the seasons. But as you know, the sun is moving all the time, and as a result, light changes every second of the day. So if you see a picture at that moment and the light is great, you have to grab it. If you wait, the light may be better, might be worse, you don't know. The picture may be better, may be worse. But if you see light that you like, you need to grab it at that moment. Let's look at a few pictures I have just to share with you how the light works and how the light interacts. Now, this is taken early morning, just before dawn. And you have what's called the golden hour of light. I have a couple of pictures I'll show you here with the golden hour. And you might have heard this term. The golden hour relates to the time basically before the sun rises and after the sun sets, when the light is really soft, really pastel, sometimes in nature's very warm light, long shadows of the sun is actually just above the horizon. But it's not exactly an hour, but it's called golden because the light is just simply beautiful. With this picture taken over the Adriatic Sea, had I waited another second or another minute or two, the light wasn't the same. You see clouds in there, they start coming to play. Maybe the picture would have been better, maybe worse, but this picture came out actually pretty nice as a result. We oftentimes think about light having to illuminate our subjects directly, but not necessarily. This light's coming from behind this gentleman, this fisherman in Malawi who's repairing his nets. And just happened to work pretty well with the canoes in the foreground kind of leading us into him, into his face, his profile at least, and his hands repairing the net. His face is less important in the image, it's more about his hands and working with the repairing of the net. But in this case, the light is actually just almost dead ahead of me, but off to the right a little bit. Or the light can come from behind you, right? And create shadows. So the shadows are wonderful. I mean, that shadows are what help us appreciate the light, actually. And you have to have light to create the shadows. So it's a combination, it's a symbiotic relationship between light and shadow that as a photographer, that gives you the compositions you're looking for, gives you the textures you'd like to have for your images. Sometimes the light is coming from overhead. In the case of this alleyway at a souk, so the light was up above and I was deep in the alley, but it illuminated these beams that were connecting the buildings as stabilizers and just created this nice little composition of with the light coming in, it got darker as it got closer to the ground. At the same souk was basically the really dark alleyway, but there was a window up above that cast this beam of light in to illuminate these doors and this lock. And so again, it's just being conscious of the light. Where's it coming from? How's it interact? What kind of compositions is the light helping you create? Because it's about your eye and what you see and trying to find those opportunities and find those moments that you can capture with your camera. I talked about the golden hour of light. Here's another image from that time period, right before sundown in this case, this young girl in Malawi. And again, the light in this case is coming almost straight at her, but just off a little bit to create just enough shadow to make it interesting. But again, that golden, warm, end of day light coming in and it just being prepared for the opportunity. So think about the light. Look again around you. What do you see? What's the light doing? How's it interacting around you at this moment? And how can you capture that with your camera? The second mistake deals with not getting close enough to your subject. It sounds kind of silly on the one hand, but oftentimes we can be a bit intimidated about grabbing the image that needs to be taken. We don't want to jump up in front of people and block their view to take the picture, or we don't want to stick out and be obvious to the world that yes, we're photographers and trying to grab these images. But sometimes we need to do that to grab the image that needs to be taken. Related to not getting close enough to the subject is including too much information in a photograph. And this can come from just being physically too far away from a subject or not paying enough attention to what the real focus of the subject is, where the real story is in the image. And as a result, we're not close enough to the subject to make a difference. So what we need to do then is to move in for a more intimate, more interesting image. Give you some examples. Now, this is the exact opposite of what I was talking about. And there are times, obviously, where you need to be far enough away from your subject in order for it to make sense. Landscapes and panoramas are classic examples of that. If I got up really close, it could be an interesting picture, but you kind of miss the layers of the mountainside and the ravine, the valley that's been carved by the river, with the waterfall, plunging into it. And so obviously with certain photographs, especially landscapes, you need to have that distance in order for the image to be effective. But other times, being too far away is a disaster. I'm embarrassed to say it, but this is one of my pictures. This is my son's graduation from university. And it was a warm day. I was a little bit tired, sitting up in the grandstand. What I needed to do was get out of my chair, go down and get the image, get a picture of him in his cap and gown. But no, I stood up there and took this picture of the mass of students. And for the life of me, I cannot find him anywhere in that crowd. What I have here is a totally meaningless photograph. It's not interesting from a composition perspective. It's not interesting on a personal basis. It's actually a completely worthless image. And so in this case, it was a classic example of not being brave enough, being afraid or being intimidated or being just lazy to get up and go get the picture that needed to be taken, get close enough to the subject in order for it to make sense, in order for it to be a real composition. Now, the exact opposite of that is getting nice and close on this portrait of this man from Tajikistan. So in the case here, I came in really close to the gentleman because I wanted to capture all the nuances of his face, the wrinkles around the eyes, his beard, his teeth, everything, his sparkling eyes, everything about this gentleman that made him who he is. And by getting nice and close in this image, we have this nice, happy face of a man who's just enjoying life. And so it's close enough to make some sense, close enough to have some character to it. And the same with these two little girls. I forget, I don't know what the subject was. They were having a little chat about something and laughing and sharing secrets. If I'd been pulled away from it, it would have lost its intimacy. It would have had too much noise around the image. But by getting in close to the girls, I was able to capture that little moment in their life where they're having a laugh and sharing some secrets or something. And so you get a sense for their relationship, their friendship, how close they are, the secrets they're sharing with one another without other noise around the image. I want to share a case study with you that talks about not getting close enough to the subject. So this is a case I call it sunflowers. And when I was living in Hungary, sunflowers were in full bloom. It's a gorgeous day. The sun was just going down. I loved how the light was playing off of the sunflowers and the textures and the backlights and everything that was happening with those flowers. So I wanted to grab some pictures. So I went out, took some pictures, took a bunch of pictures. There was one image I took I was really excited about. And when I looked at it later, I realized I missed the whole mess. I missed the opportunity with that image because I had too much information in the picture. I did not get close enough to the subject in order for it to make sense. But, thanks to being able to crop some things, when I cropped out the extraneous information, I was able to find the real story in the picture. So here's the original image. Honestly, it's not exciting. It's not even worthy of a postcard. It's nothing noteworthy at all. I like the backlight. That's what I was trying to accomplish. Grab this backlight with the textures and the dark greens in the background against the yellows in the front. Okay, I accomplished part of that, but the picture itself is quite honestly really, really boring. But what I found was if I cropped out all the noise, got rid of all the extraneous information from around the perimeter of the image, inside that square, that's where the story was. That's where the picture was. And when I crop it all out, that's what you have. So I still have the backlit feeling. I had this nice subtle texture, these petals of the two flowers kind of reaching across and touching one another, kind of saying hello to one another. And that's where the image was. So by getting rid of all the extraneous information around the image, I was able to capture the picture I really wanted to. So getting close enough to the subject is really, really critical in order to capture the right image. The last one is, I call it missing the less obvious. Think about that for a second. It's a little awkward. But how we see obvious things, but do we miss the less obvious things nearby or less obvious things around us as opportunities? So take, for example, if you were to go to a tourist site of some kind, some historical building or a sculpture or an event or something, where is everybody else focused? And what are they focused on? What are they taking pictures of? And then look around that. where are they not looking and what's of interest that's nearby that other people are missing because they're seeing what the obvious thing is, but they're missing the less obvious that's available to them. So as a photographer, our job really is to not follow the crowd. We need to be, as artists, we need to be looking elsewhere for the magic because it's there and it's just waiting for us to find it. For example, this is scaffolding, right, between two buildings. You walk by it on the street, don't pay any attention, it's a construction site. But just taking a pause to grab this image, it strikes me as some sort of space age Futurama type thing, or maybe it's a circuit board. It looks very, very different when photographed than it does just walking by, looking at it as scaffolding that people normally pass by because it's just a construction site. Or leaving a cafe in Greece one day, finished lunch, packed up, heading out the door. I turned around and looked and saw the light coming in and the little composition it created with the chairs and the light on the floor that made this composition. Now, normally, we'd grab our bags, push our chairs in, walk out the restaurant, not pay attention. But just by being conscious of the light and looking for the opportunities, that's when this image presented itself. Or this image from Rome. It's a bridge full of angel statues near the Vatican. And most people are walking in the middle of the bridge and looking at the statues on the front side. I walked around behind the statue. I looked at it from off the side to see what was there. And the warm, again, end of day light coming in, that golden hour of light coming in, streaming across the sculpture, added a little different texture to it, added a different image, a different composition that I could not have gotten had I been on the other side of where everybody else was looking, trying to find something a bit different. Or this is also in Rome, okay, a little street scene there that most people would miss. They might be looking for the sign for the restaurant or for the hotel, but they wouldn't be looking for the composition, the textures, and to see the layers upon layers of the warm yellow buildings with the end of day sun streaming on that, and trying to find these little compositions. And this is what our task is, our mission, our responsibility as photographers, is to find these opportunities and capture them to show the world there are so many other things to see beyond what is truly obvious. Now, the same can happen with portraiture. In this case, it's a father and son photograph. And instead of the face of the father smiling or whatever, and the face of the baby, I chose this image because it's the less obvious image. You have this young baby cradled in his father's strong tattooed arms. You get that contrast of this young, fresh life against an older, stronger life, stronger adult. And just a different way to think about the less obvious when it comes to portraits. Or this portrait, for example. It's interesting when you're photographing people, if you want to take a portrait of somebody, give them time to settle in to the moment and settle in, let them think about some things and ponder some things. Portraits are a lot more revealing when they're really less posed than they are when they're posed. So instead of having this gentleman look at me when I took his picture, in this case, I waited for him to settle into his own thoughts. And you can see his wife in the background, her head tilted to the side. In my mind, it's a bit of a loving look at her husband, looking at him. And he's not that old, but he obviously has some worries. You can see his furrowed brow, and he's deep in thought about something. And just that moment with his loving wife looking on him and him staring off, thinking about something really important, was the moment to capture the less obvious portrait. So what we've covered in this lesson is, number one, to be conscious of light at all times. A few minutes ago, I asked you to look around you and see the light. What do you see? Take a look right now. What do you see? What light do you see around you at this moment? How's it interacting with things? And as you go out every day and go out and do your work or whatever you're doing, be conscious of the light and see. Just watch for it. How does it interact with subjects and objects around you at all times? The second thing we learned was to include only what's important in the images. First of all, get close enough to the subject to have it be important, or get rid of the noise around the real story in the image. Don't be afraid to cut ruthlessly and get rid of things that don't make sense in a photograph, because that you want to tell the story. You want to capture that one magical moment in time. And speaking of magic, we need to be looking in the less obvious places for magic around us. because that's where the opportunities are. That's where the magic truly is not with the obvious, but the less obvious. That's where interesting situations are, interesting compositions, interesting moments in life can be found in those less obvious moments. Now, to move your work forward in this lesson, look, we all make mistakes. It's part of life. It's part of learning, and mistakes are good because we learn from those mistakes. The key is that we don't repeat them too much, hopefully, right? So we try to learn from our lessons and move on and try not to keep repeating them over and over again. But some mistakes can be avoided up front. And I'm hoping these few lessons here I shared with you can help you as well with your work. Because when you're conscious of where the light is and relative to your subject, very conscious about it, that's where the opportunities come in to capture that moment in time. And where you are in terms of distance from your subject. You'd be thinking about the light, be thinking about the distance, and ultimately the composition. What's included in the image and what's not included in the image. And that's where the opportunity really lies. Now in this video, I'm actually going to give you an assignment. I think it's an opportunity here to practice some of the concepts we learned. What I'd like you to do is to choose an object or location that's convenient for you. You don't need to go out of your way to find something nearby that is of interest to you. What's important is to deliberately shoot this subject at different times of the day from the same angle and perspective. I'd like you to create a series of 5 images that have a different feel to them based only on the changes in light. And when you look at those images, what do you see? What do you feel? What do they say to you? Only through practice and experimentation can your eye evolve and your style develop, and that becomes a reflection of you as a photographer, as an artist. When you shoot, I encourage you to shoot a lot of images to practice these concepts, which will help improve your craft. But most importantly, you need to shoot with purpose. Deliberately take the picture, take some time to think about the image before you compose it, and before you press the shutter release. Not just take 1,000 images of a subject and hope you get the right one, but to deliberately take some time to think about the work as you compose it and as you capture that image. Now, as a bonus, below this video, you'll find some field notes you can download that'll help you when you work on this assignment. Finally, I'd like to leave you with a quote from the photographer Berenice Abbott, who said, "Imagine a world without photography. One could only imagine."